Relying exclusively on streaming services is the fastest way to surrender control over the music you love. As an audiophile and engineer, I spend my time optimizing signal chains, and I can tell you that when you stream, you are at the mercy of whatever mastering version of the file that platform decides to feed you. If you are investing thousands of dollars into a high-end digital audio player, but not building an offline content library, you are voluntarily giving up the exact bit-perfect dynamic range your gear was engineered to reproduce. Good morning, everyone. Grab your coffee. Welcome back to Morning Muses. Today, we're talking about something that feels a little old school, but is actually one of the most important things you can do for your listening experience: building a dedicated offline music library. Now, I stream music every single day. I love the convenience of it, but when I really want to sit down and do some critical listening, or when I'm taking my Astell and Kern player on the road, I'm always pulling from my offline local storage. A lot of you guys have asked me why I still bother buying and downloading WAV or FLAC files in an era where Wi-Fi is everywhere. Honestly, it comes down to security and control. You don't have to worry about rights holders pulling your favorite album off a server in the middle of the night. But more importantly, from an engineering standpoint, you get absolute control over what is passing through your DAC. Let's break down exactly how I build my library, where I get my files, and how I prep them for a high-end digital audio player so they run perfectly every time. The very first thing we need to talk about is why local files give you a massive advantage over streaming apps. And it has everything to do with mastering. When you listen to a classic album on a streaming platform, you're typically listening to the absolute newest, most recently remastered version of that album. Now, sometimes a modern remaster is a revelation, but very often, especially with rock and pop albums from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, modern remasters have fallen victim to what we call loudness wars. Audio engineers are sometimes pressured to compress the dynamic range of an album so that quiet parts are just as loud as the loud parts, making it pop more or stand out in car radios or cheap Bluetooth earbuds. The problem is you aren't listening to cheap Bluetooth earbuds. You're listening to a high-end DAP with a reference headphone. If that file itself had all of its dynamics crushed out of it, your expensive gear cannot invent dynamics that are no longer there. When you build your offline library, you get to stop letting streaming platforms dictate which version of the album you hear. You take back control. So how do you find the best version? Before I buy an album digitally or track down a physical CD, I go to a website called Dynamic Range Database. It is an incredibly free, independent resource where audiophiles upload the dynamic range metrics for basically every release of an album in history. You can type in an album from 1985 and you might see 20 different releases listed: the original CD run and the 1995 remaster, or maybe even a 2005 box set, or a 2015 high-res digital release. The database gives each release a score. Green numbers mean it has an excellent, wide dynamic range. Red numbers mean it's highly compressed. What you'll often find is that the original unremastered CD pressing from the late 80s or the early 90s actually contains the purest, most dynamic version of that music ever released. Once you identify which specific release has the best mastering, you can hunt down the exact version, whether by buying the digital download or tracking down the physical CD on eBay and store it locally. You are guaranteeing that the signal hitting your amplifier is the absolute best version of the music in existence. Once you know what you're looking for, you have to actually source the digital file. For digital storefronts, my two absolute favorites are Bandcamp and Qobuz. Bandcamp is incredibly artist-friendly. They share a massive cut of their revenue with the artist, which is something I always want to support. You can often name your own price, and when you purchase an album, they let you choose the exact file format you want to download. Qobuz is also fantastic, especially if you're looking for more mainstream artists that might not be on Bandcamp. Their download store is packed with high-resolution lossless files. I try to stick strictly to purchasing FLAC files. FLAC is an open-source lossless format, meaning you get bit-perfect audio quality, but the file is compressed just enough to save some storage space without losing a single drop of data. But this brings up a crucial technical point about resolution. When you go onto Qobuz or Bandcamp, you will often see options to buy massive 24-bit, 192 kilohertz high-resolution files. They look really impressive on paper, but you need to be careful not to overpay for a resolution that might actually hold your portable gear back. Here is the engineering reality. Huge file sizes with ultra-high sample rates require significant more processing power to decode. When you're using a portable digital audio player, you're running on a mobile processor and a lithium-ion battery. If you load up a terabyte micro SD card with nothing but massively dense 24-bit 192 kilohertz files, you are forcing that DAPS processor to work overtime just to read and unpack that data. This can sometimes lead to playback hiccups, sluggish user interfaces, and noticeably faster battery drain. For the vast majority of listening, a standard 16-bit 44.1 kilohertz, which is a standard CD quality, is the absolute perfect sweet spot for portable audio. It sounds completely flawless, it takes up far less storage space, and it allows your DAPS processor to run efficiently so your battery lasts longer. Don't feel like you have to buy the highest possible number just because it's there. Buy the 16-bit FLAC version, download them directly to your computer first, and make sure your file hygiene is perfect. Organize them into folders by artist, then album, and make sure the ID3 tags are clean. Having properly tagged music ensures that when you finally drop it onto your DAP, the operating system can easily index the artwork and track lists without having any kind of errors. For newer recordings these days, most studios that I have talked to produce recordings at 24-bit 96 kilohertz. If you want higher res, this is the place to start. Note that most recordings don't use up all of that bit rate. In fact, they don't even come close, but can benefit from higher dynamics. For DSD purchases, I really stick around the DSD 64 camp, again for the same reason. Nothing is recorded at a much higher sampling rate and then downsampled. It's the opposite. Everything in remastering process is upsampled, thus trying to create something from nothing. Now, what if that perfect mastering you found on the Dynamic Range database isn't available on Qobuz or Bandcamp? What if it's an obscure 1989 CD pressing that you had to buy for $5 on eBay or dig out of a thrift store? You are going to need to rip that physical CD. You can pick up an external CD-ROM drive for your computer for about $30 these days, but the software you use to rip that disc is incredibly important. I highly recommend a program called DB PowerCamp. It isn't free, but it's worth every penny if you're serious about building an offline content. It reads the disc, connects to an online database to automatically pull in the correct ID3 tags and album artwork, and rips the tracks directly to the FLAC. More importantly, it does secure rips. It will analyze the disc for scratches, reread the problematic sector over and over again to ensure that the digital file it creates is mathematically a perfect clone of the physical disc. It takes the guesswork completely out of it. So now you have all of these beautiful, curated, perfectly mastered FLAC files sitting on your computer. The final step is getting them onto your digital audio player. This is where a lot of people make a critical mistake that causes endless frustration. Almost all modern high-end DAPs, including the ones we sell from Astell and Kern, run on a heavily customized version of the Android operating system. Because offline lossless files take up a lot of space, you're likely going to be using a massive external micro SD card, something like 512 gigabytes or even a terabyte. If you just take a brand new 1 terabyte card out of a package, plug it into your Mac or PC, drag files over, and shove it into your Astell and Kern player, you're probably going to run into problems. You must format that micro SD card correctly before you put any music on it. For Android-based players, the absolute gold standard, most stable formats use is FAT32. Out of the box, massive SD cards are usually formatted in exFAT. While exFAT works fine for modern computers, Android-based audio players can sometimes struggle to index massive libraries on an exFAT drive, which can lead to data corruption, missing tracks, or the player just freezing up while it searches for a file. Take the time to format the card to FAT32. Once the card is properly formatted, pop it into your DAP. From there, you can connect the DAP to your computer and manually migrate the files over. Alternatively, if you are using an Astell and Kern player, you can use the AK file drop feature to wirelessly transfer those perfectly curated FLAC files straight from the computer to your player over your home Wi-Fi network. It might take a little bit longer, but it is very convenient. By the way, if you are using offline downloads within your streaming apps, like saving an album from offline listening in Qobuz or Tidal, you could actually jump into the settings for those specific apps on your DAP and change the download destination, from the internal storage to your freshly formatted memory card. That way, your offline streaming library and your own local library can both live harmoniously on the same massive, stable storage drive. Taking the time to curate your own offline library guarantees that you are in total control of your signal path and the mastering. If you liked geeking out over audio with me today, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments how you manage your library. Now, if building a local library has you thinking about dusting off your old physical media, you actually might not need to rip all of them. Our video on why CD players are making a massive comeback breaks down everything you need to know. Click the video right here, and I'll see you over there.